And we will be picking up on Chapter 5 of God Will Work With You, but Not For You, a Living Philosophy by Lau Russell. Chapter 5, Mind Consciousness. The third stage in human unfolding is mind consciousness, which is the stage that follows sense consciousness. It is the stage represented by world geniuses. The average man considers geniuses to be specially born. They are not specially born, however. They are like other they are like other men that they are like other men except that they are farther unfolded spiritually. Mind consciousness has always belonged to man since the beginning. The human race does not acquire new qualities. It reveals existent ones as it unfolds. Nothing is ever added to man from without. Whatever man becomes physically, intellectually, or spiritually unfolds from within. Even after millions of years of his unfolding, all that appears was in the first cells of his beginning. Nature does not evolve. It eternally unfolds and refolds. The idea is externally existent. But all idea is externally existent. The man idea is a part of the one whole idea of creation. It is complete as idea, but its manifestation in time and space is divided into timed recordings in space. Likewise, all knowledge in the soul seed of all mankind. The genius discovers this fact from much aloneness, much meditation, much communion with nature. He discovers that knowledge comes in flashes and inspiration as he desires it. When he expresses his desire by inner thinking, it unfolds within his consciousness, and he recognizes it. He realizes that he has always known it. The genius knows that knowledge is limited to unchanging cause and cannot be acquired through fleeting effects of ever-changing matter unless translated back to cause by inner thinking. Effects of motion are observed by the senses, but the senses cannot acquire knowledge. The senses can record and repeat effects, but cannot know that which they record and repeat. Knowing, therefore, that knowledge is a quality of mind only and cannot be sensed. And also knowing that creative energy has its existence in mind only, geniuses acquire power to command material bodies from within their own consciousness. The more they become aware of their own centering consciousness from which their knowledge and power is extended, the more they become aware of their divinity and oneness with God. Increasing God awareness gradually brings the ecstasy of the God mind and full awareness that God is forever working with them as they work with Him to give masterliness to their creations. Works thus created endure forever. No work of man is enduring unless created in the ecstasy of God awareness which characterizes all geniuses. The work of man, which are but recordings and repeatings of sensed observations and memories, are but transient and fleeting. God is not in them. Man's senses alone are in them. They are soulless. They do not inspire, for inspiration is not in them. Men who have reached that high state of consciousness know their destiny from early childhood. They are in full control of their destiny and would not compromise for all the wealth in the world. Once they have found the treasures of heaven within themselves, they would die penniless rather than sully their creations. To them it would be an exchange of immorality for a mirage. To them it would be an exchange for immortality for a mirage. Every genius is aware of his exalted position as a divinely inspired messenger to those who are seeking delight. Those thousands whom he inspires are exalted to greater and still greater heights. The human race is thus enriched by each inspired messenger to man who speaks to man in God's inspired language. It is through such messengers that culture comes into the world to slowly uplift it to its higher stages. As culture increases in man, his ability to become inspired multiplies. The ascension of any man to great heights is dependent upon his ability to become re-inspired by the inspired messages brought to him by world geniuses. Mind multiplies his power to uplift mankind to higher cultural levels when he is engaged in peaceful pursuits which promote friendliness, when he is engaged in warlike pursuits and unfair business practices, which promote enmities, human progress ceases. It reverses toward decadence. An increasing number of geniuses have come into the world since the beginning of the 14th century, but their number has not exceeded 100 during the 6 centuries of world progress which so suddenly ended in the year of 1914. When the world becomes decadent, it crucifies geniuses. Lack of recognition and patronage prevents geniuses from giving its priceless treasures to the world. In addition, many lose all opportunity of enriching the world by being compelled to kill men instead of serve them. The measure in which inspiration is withdrawn from men is the measure in which spiritual decadence takes whole civilizations back toward their primacy. God will work with men who desire to work with him, but he will not work for men beyond their own desire. Decadence is more conspicuous in the great masses who have not advanced to the point where they have the slightest awareness of that spiritual state of mind, which inspiration is. There are countless millions of these uninspired, unillumined human units who are still deeply barbarian. There are many, many thousands, however, who have developed the inner vision and the inner ears, which inspiration unfolds in every man. These many thousands are the fruit of the few who have made them inwardly see and hear those concepts of imaginings and the voices which arise from nature's silences that are beyond the range of physical perception. These are the ones who will save the race, if it is to be saved, but their numbers are 1 to 1,000, or even less. They are the few cultured ones who love a symphony concert and would suffer at a prize fight against the countless thousands who love the prize fight and would suffer at a symphony concert. These are the ones who are keeping the Christian spirit alive in the world by leading man in the direction of the kingdom of heaven, which man may find only through inner inspired thinking. Inner thinking men seek aloneness in the forests and far reaches in nature, away from the noises of man's activities. They thus insulate themselves from their own body desires and from all sounds which are not the rhythmic pulsations of nature. Such aloneness leads to deep meditation and silent prayer. Aloneness invites close communion with God. He who thus seeks God will find him. He will know him by seeing his light with inner vision, hearing his voice coming out of nature's silences in the rhythms of its heartbeat, and feeling the ecstasy of his love nature upon which his universe is based. In such great aloneness of man with God, all that is evil in primate man disappears into its own dark. The great masters could not possibly interpret God's rhythmic language, if even the slightest trace of evil touched their thinking. Likewise, no man can listen with his soul to the rhythmic symphonies of the great masters, and think evil while so listening. Herein lies the great power of music in conserving and multiplying the Christian spirit among men. Music is the greatest of all the powers used by man to bring about the state of universal brotherhood, which is primarily essential for a Christian civilization. Painting is the next great power for inducing inspiration, which leads to inner thinking. These statements are so liable to change by the unthinking that it is necessary to recall that painting and music, such as we know them in our day, are unknown until the 12th and 15th centuries respectively. The spiritual nature of either music or painting could not unfold while the memory and love of bloodshed was so strong in the race that the greatest pleasures of its men, women, and children were gladiatorial killings and the rending of humans by lions. Inner spiritual thinking had begun during the Hellenic age and evidenced its effect in the beauty of architecture and sculpture. But by the time Jesus was born, there had been 400 years of decadence in which bloodshed became the greatest pleasure. While the human race was in such a primate stage, it could not comprehend God's rhythmic language. His cosmic language could only be comprehended and interpreted by those who were seeking the kingdom of heaven by inner spiritual thinking. This stage of human unfolding has never been reached until Leonardo and Raphael gave the world their interpretation of nature's rhythms in the art of painting. Perhaps it has not occurred to humanity at large that Leonardo and Raphael were the strongest force in reawakening the Christian spirit. The church of that day spoke to men in a language which had no meaning to them. They had no opportunity for comprehension, for Latin words conveyed no meaning to them whatsoever. Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, and many others spoke to the people of that day in God's language of color, rhythms, and forms which they did understand. Even the most lowly peasant could understand the Last Supper, or the Madonna, and child interpretations of numerous followers of Leonardo. Jesus became alive and real to them. The apostles and other figures which to them were holy rose before their eyes and filled them with a new hope. Every home became a religious shrine. Jesus and their Blessed Virgin were in their very presence. Religious fervor rose to the great heights as a reality in those days of seeming hopelessness. Paintings gave reality to their religion. The spirit of man unfolded to some extent, even though religion was more emotional and ritual than worship. Pagan legend and superstition joined their powers with ignorant man's love of the supernatural to retard its growth. Spiritual man grew, however, against even that resistance, for even religious emotionalism led to desire, and desire for closer contact with God led to prayer, and prayer induced inner thinking. The words of the spiritual teacher of that day were full of fear and evil. The spiritual words of the divine messengers who spoke to the people in form, color, and electrical rhythms had no fear or evil in them. Fear and evil have no existence in nature. It is impossible to estimate the value of painting and music to the spiritual unfoldment of man. When one realizes that less than 100 men transformed thousands upon thousands of barbarian stage men into the realms of spiritual consciousness, it should help one to realize the value of every genius to the world. One Beethoven or one Leonardo is worth more in material value to mankind than the value of all the gold and real estate in the world. Yet mankind crucifies geniuses today as he crucified love 2,000 years ago. It is imperative that you more fully understand why there is such an incalculable power in the masterpieces of world geniuses to transform men from sensuality to spirituality. It is equally imperative that you fully understand what is meant by God's language, which you know as inspiration. All down through man's long ages, God has spoken to man. His silent voice spoke to him first as instinct, then as intuition, and then by inspiration. Inspiration is the language of rhythms which the genius as fully Inspiration is the language of rhythms which the genius as fully understands as other people understand the language of words. The final or ultimate means of communion between man and God is the language of light that comes to Christ-conscious man. Chapter 7, Christ Consciousness, further describes this final stage of unfolding. World geniuses who talk to God through inspiration hear only the rhythms of nature. These rhythms are in harmony with the universal heartbeat. They are the 1-2 rhythms of the electrical pulsations of God's thinking. They are in tune with every action-reaction of nature. That is what is meant by being in tune with the infinite. There are no unbalanced or split rhythms in spiritual nature, such as those which sensual man makes use of for his body excitation. Let's read that again. There are no unbalanced or split rhythms in spiritual nature, such as those which sensual man makes use of for body excitation. The rhythms and attunement of falling waters, or the whispering of soft winds in meadows, or the mighty pounding of the surf on the seashore. Sands are in tune with the in-breathing, out-breathings of the planet, or the beating of every living heart in the universe. These are the rhythms which the great masters interpret to uplift and inspire to spiritual ecstasy. These rhythms make one forget body because they synchronize with body pulsations. For that reason, they do not cause physical sensation. Outer thinkers desire sensual rhythms which do not synchronize with body pulsations. Excitation can come to bodies only by changing the rhythm and tempo of their heartbeat. The moment the tempo of a heartbeat is slowed down in any musical rhythm, it slows down the heartbeat of the listener. That is why a baby goes to sleep whenever the mother croons a soothing lullaby. The power that music has within its rhythms and tempos to affect life is inconceivable. The rhythms and tempos of the great world geniuses uplift the whole world toward its high heavens and cause those whom it can touch to seek the kingdom of heaven which centers them. Likewise, the discordant and split rhythms that are not in tune with nature and the heartbeat of man multiply the sensations which the purely physical man seeks as entertainment for his body. However, the 1-2-3 balanced rhythm of the waltz focuses attention upon the body by combining both the spiritual and physical emotions. The third beat, which characterizes the waltz in its perfect balance with the two and creates the desire for happy movement of balanced rhythms which combine the physical with the spiritual. Beyond that, three in musical rhythms, one cannot go without splitting one or all of them. The greater the departure from the balanced rhythms of nature to the syncopated rhythms of man's desire for physical sensation, the greater the possibility of spiritual suppression in favor of physical degradation. The power of music to degrade as well as to uplift is well exemplified in the jazz rhythms and tempos which shriek out of their degrading power in raucous sounds that violate nature's rhythms, as the sounds of a busy factory violate its peaceful countryside environment. Sensual men do not appreciate the music which deeply inspires inner-thinking men. They have not sufficiently unfolded as yet to understand it. The power of spirituality-inspired music is so great, however, that many thousands are gradually being transformed by oft-repeated renditions. Classical records are being distributed by the hundreds of thousands, and their effect is one of the most hopeful signs of the times, as well as being one of the greatest demonstrations of the power of music to transform sensual thinkers into spiritual thinkers. The greatest passion of every genius is to give all the world treasures of heaven that have been given to him. A Beethoven, Mozart, Leonardo, or Tennessee could not possibly withhold his treasures unto himself. Having become aware of their oneness with their Creator, who gives freely of all, he has, and without motive. Wait. Damn, I don't know. Having become aware of their oneness with their Creator, who gives freely of all, he has, and without motive, they also must freely and without motive. The reward motive, which is so characteristic of those who are sense-dominated, does not exist in nature. Giving in nature creates a vacuum that can be filled only by a balanced re-giving. Giving in nature is the first half of every electric cycle. It is an impossibility in nature for one half of an electric cycle to remain uncompleted. It must complete itself. It cannot do otherwise. It must void itself by its own balancing counterpart. No one can give, therefore, without a cosmic certainty of being equally re-given. For that reason, the reward motive in nature is not part of God's plan. For the same reason, it is difficult for the genius to live in a material world. He must live, however. He must bargain with those who would buy from him. He must sell that which is his greatest happiness to give. It is against his very nature to be compelled to do that. It sickens his very soul, for he is fully aware that he has been born ahead of his time and is compelled to live always in two worlds. His great recompense, however, is the fact that he can always escape from the outer world of material things and live in his own inner world of the spirit, which he can commune with God to his heart's content and forget all things else, especially his body. Judged by material standards, the genius is an impractical dreamer, a subnormal who lacks the ability to make money as normal folks do. As children, they are usually low in their marks, for the educational plan of this age stultifies genius by educating the brain instead of unfolding the mind. Thomas Edison was sent home from school with a note from the teacher advising his mother to put him in a school for subnormals. The practice of schools has been to develop a civilization which has learned to remember and repeat, instead of unfolding their imaginative faculties by teaching them to think and know. The intelligence test for high scholarship marks is based upon how many questions one can answer. To attain great heights in that respect, one has to have a photographic memory, which outward-sensed thinkers readily develop. It is impossible, however, for anyone to have a photographic mind. That is why a genius is so often considered stupid in school. A great many children are utterly ruined by this process. They may really be the brightest children in the school with strong creative abilities that a few years of suppression of their creative faculties ruin for world purposes. Information is not knowledge. It is of no importance whatsoever that one should remember the date of Caesar's death or the date of the Battle of Waterloo. One might be able to answer every question in the encyclopedia and yet have no knowledge. A student who receives a low intelligence rating because he could not remember the name of the river which flowed into the Caspian Sea and the capital of Finland, might be consoled by the probability that Shakespeare or Dickens might also not be able to answer these questions. Under such a memory system, the boys who have the greatest initiative, imagination, and resourcefulness could be judged the most stupid, while the plotter with a photographic memory and no initiative could be judged the brightest. Information might be likened to food which will nourish a body when it has been digested and enters the bloodstream. Information can lead to knowledge when digested through reasoning and mind thinking, but as long as it is only brain recording, it is of no value to creative expression. To remember and repeat through experimentation, reasoning, and assembling other brain recordings of observed effects does not constitute knowledge. It but indicates cleverness. The highly technical world of many skills is very much more the result of great cleverness in the assembling of observed effects of motion than it is the result of knowledge. When the world begins to acquire knowledge, it will show the effects of it in human relations instead of chemical and metallurgical relations. The human race has not yet acquired sufficient knowledge to know the law which makes it possible for man to live with man, or to know the relation of woman to man. It is too concerned with the application of the many physical laws to the relation of physical matter to give thought to God's one and only law that governs spiritual relations. World desire for knowing what holds the atom together has only an economical and material basis. Such knowledge would be worth untold millions in new machines and comforts for man. That is the basis of world desire for knowledge. It has only a money value. Its spiritual value has not yet entered into human consciousness. For that very reason, God will not let man have that knowledge, and man will never find it while he seeks in the wrong direction. Actually, the answer is right before man's eyes, but he does not recognize it while his eyes have outer vision alone. When inner vision comes through inner thinking, he will then recognize it in all its simplicity. All who have arrived at the cosmic mind state know what holds the atom together, and they do not need cyclotrons to tell them that secret of the invisible universe. Knowledge of cause can never be acquired from motion. It can be acquired only from the source of motion. Empirical knowledge is a term used as a name for the results of sensed observation. Knowledge cannot be gained through the senses, for the senses are unable to see the true picture of any effect of motion whatsoever. No effect in nature is what it seems to be. A three-dimensional objective universe is as much an illusion as a cinema is an illusion. Truth and reality cannot be deduced from a simulation of truth and reality. This universe of motion is but a cosmic cinema projected upon the screen of space from its light source in thinking mind. Its reality is at its source, and not in the projected image. The most imaginative years of life are between the ages of 3 and 14. During those years, whatever is created in a child should be developed and encouraged. Instead of cramming for examinations where questions are to be asked, children should be encouraged to take an hour's walk in the woods or through a store or around a city block, then asked to write an essay on what they saw or what their thoughts were, A creative education should be based upon doing things which cause the children to think and know, rather than to remember and repeat. During school years, the main object should be to develop creative expression by stimulating the imagination. This is helpful in awakening that spark of genius which is in everyone, for creative expression compels inner thinking. A small percentage of time should be spent in giving them the essentials for that expression, such as simple mathematics, grammar, spelling, and geography. Every other study, such as history or languages, one should get by reading during subsequent years. It would be better for the new generation if all history study could be withdrawn from the schools. It is all written upon a war basis and glorification of the desire in pagan man to kill his fellow man. History as written for schools is a war-to-war inventory. Its motive is to promote hero worship of world killers. The motive upon which history should be written, if its purpose is to enlighten the human race instead of degrading it, is to teach the lessons of agony that wars have given to man. They should be lessons which demonstrate that war does not pay, as some of our crime lessons demonstrate that crime does not pay. We had a long period of crime movies which promoted an increased crime and juvenile delinquency because it glorified the criminal. Burglars, killers, and outlaws were characterized as heroes. The effect upon the world's increase in crime and youth delinquency was so noticeable that the entire motive had to be changed to act as a lesson for crime deterrent. All history studies should be written upon this basis. Drawing, painting, sculpture, and music should be a part of every child's education. Children always love to draw. Desire for drawing and painting develops in early childhood. It should be encouraged in every way. Likewise, the music of the great masters should not only be heard, but analyzed until thoroughly understood in comparison with split rhythms of sensualism. The principle of educating the senses instead of unfolding the treasures of the mind in creative expression is not only very hurtful to the individual, but it is hurtful to the effort of keeping the Christian spirit alive and multiplying it throughout the land. Every accentuation of sensuous thinking lessens the desire for spiritual expression and increases all of the qualities which the human race must eliminate in order to progress towards its goal. To spend valuable years in thus stultifying and smoldering that spark of divinity which must someday be illumined into activity for every man is a great and tragic pity. My husband, who has achieved masterliness in all of the 5 fine arts, besides making invaluable contributions to science, often says that the most fortunate happenings of his life was being taken out of school at 9. He fully knew his destiny at 7 years of age, as practically all geniuses do. Summary. Jesus said, "Seek ye the kingdom of heaven within you." The genius has come very close to having reached that center which Jesus had himself completely found. When this stage in human unfolding has reached by enough of the human race to dominate its transactions one with another, wars will be impossible. Material values are the basis of all wars. The genius stage of unfolding places no value whatsoever upon material things. Greed and acquisitiveness is not in it. The sense of evil is not in it. It would be impossible and unthinkable for a Beethoven or Sibelius to even think the inharmonies which are necessary to wage war. The only way to hold civilization together is to bring a cosmic harmony into it through transactions based upon love. It is impossible to hold it together It is impossible to hold it together as a workable organization in any other way. We have now reached the point in this man-made world where hate, suspicion, and greed are sitting at conference tables to bargain with each other. The more they bargain, the greater the necessity for increased armament. Those who sit at bargaining tables are Those who sit at the bargaining tables are men the conquerors, and fathers of conquerors. Women and mothers and peacemakers are not with their men at the conference tables. There will never be peace on earth and goodwill toward men until fatherhood and motherhood sit together as world fatherhood and motherhood to extend loving service to one another. Such unbalance is a violation of God's inviolate law which no earthly power can set aside and survive, as man is now so futilely trying to do. Perhaps it is that woman is the only hope of saving this civilization. Chapter 6, Cosmic Consciousness. The fourth stage of human unfoldment of sensual man to spiritual man is the high stage of cosmic consciousness. This stage is far behind the genius stage. As the genius is ahead of the barbarian, it is difficult for those who have not yet reached the genius stage to comprehend that stage, but it is possible for everyone to recognize that it is existent because the works of the great cosmic geniuses are evident everywhere. Everyone knows that there really are superhuman people like Michelangelo, Brahms, or Mozart, even though they know that they themselves are not like them. Likewise, there have been about 100 great geniuses whose works are so conspicuously in evidence that there is no question that a much higher state of mentality is possible than the average mentality. The state of cosmic consciousness was first referred to in India as the Brahmic Bliss. It was also referred to as Nirvana, meaning the ultimate goal of mankind, in which all identity is lost in the universal identity. The New Testament referred to it as being in the Spirit and as the atoning. It is also referred to as the state of ecstasy. Cosmic consciousness is so rare, however, that there have probably not been more than 15 completely illumined examples in all history. By that I mean those who have had the experience of complete severance of sensation from consciousness, followed by long periods, rather than those who had but momentary flashes and found themselves in a state of confusion. Dr. Richard Maurice Buck is the greatest authority upon cosmic consciousness. His own personal illumination lasted but a few seconds, but so completely transformed him that he devoted the rest of his life to study of other cases and writing in a book which is of inestimable value to those who are seeking to awaken their own spiritual awareness. The symptoms he described will enable one to recognize those symptoms of awakening genius or cosmic consciousness, which they may have experienced but do not comprehend. Dr. Buck lists about 40 cases and erringly includes Jesus among these. Jesus is the one who has reached the highest stage of divine awareness, Christ consciousness, which will be described next. Cosmic consciousness utterly transforms those who have already reached the high stage of the genius into an incredible greater stage of spiritual mind existence. Some of these cases have actually bridged the genius stage, or passed through it, without knowing it. When cosmic consciousness consumes one with its illumination of soul-mind, it comes very suddenly, without any warning whatsoever, and without being suspected. There are no indications of it, nor can it be induced by anybody, no matter how familiar one becomes with its reality. Full and sudden cosmic illumination is attended with a flash of cosmic light which is invisible to everyone except the recipient of it. The New Testament describes Paul's inspiration. The New Testament describes Paul's spiritual illumination into cosmic consciousness. Cosmic Consciousness by Dr. Richard Maurice Buke. E.P. Dutton Company, New York. Quotations from this book will appear in this chapter and be indicated by an asterisk. Okay. He becomes transformed. He will transform because from that moment he was as different a mentality as the mentality of a full-grown man exceeds the mentality of a child. What happens is that the doors to the kingdom of heaven seem to open suddenly, and all the glory of God's light of all knowledge and all power become revealed. The recipient becomes transformed with knowledge of his absolute unity with God. He at once begins to think with God and know his thoughts as being his own. He suddenly becomes fully aware that the voice which he first heard millions of years ago as instinct, then as intuition, then as inspiration, is God's voice in his own as one. There is no longer any mystery about it, no vagueness, no yearning to pierce the impenetrable. He has pierced it. He has found that center of stillness which his soul is. He can now knowingly say, I and my Father are one, for he has become that one. This is what is meant by revelations. It is knowledge which has been cosmically revealed. The explanation of the flash of light which accompanies all cases of complete cosmic consciousness is caused by a short circuit that severs the two centers of sensation in the two lobes of the brain from the seat of consciousness. Such a flash occurs also at the instant of death. It has been photographed many times. One distinctive feature of cosmic consciousness is that everyone who experiences it states the same things. They all experience a tremendous state of ecstasy, which is God nature, a deep conviction of love and the oneness of God and man, and the idea of evil and death entirely disappears into their complete knowledge of immortality and eternal life. Whatever a cosmic conscious mystic writes is fully understood by any other mystic. No matter how different the words may be, their sense is universal. Their language is alike, but it is strange to all but those of high culture or great spiritual unfolding. For better understanding of these divine ones among men, I will quote characteristic sayings of the 8 most highly illumined ones. The first known case is the writer of the Bhagavad-Gita. No one knows who he was, but his immortal words have already outlived thousands of years and will endure as long as man endures. The following quotations sing their own glory in the unmistakable language of the divine mystic. Another sun gleams there, another moon, another light, not dusk, nor dawn, nor noon, which they who once behold return no more. They have attained my rest, life's utmost boon. Chapter 15 of the Bhagavad-Gita. Fain would I see, as thou thyself declarest it, sovereign Lord, the likeness of thy form wholly revealed, O thou divinest one. If this can be, if I may bear the sight, make thyself visible. Lord of all prayers, show me thy very self, eternal God. Behold, this is the universe. Look, what is live and dead, I gather all in one in me. Gaze at thy lips have said, gaze at thy lips have said, on God, eternal, very God. See me, see what thou prayest, thou canst not, nor with human eyes ever mayest. Therefore I give thee sense divine, have other eyes, new light, and look, this is my glory, unveiled to moral sight. Chapter 11 of the Bhagavad-Gita. One of many thousand mortals, one perchance striveth for truth, and of these few that strive, nay, and rise high, one only, here and there, knoweth me as I am, the very truth. Chapter 8 of the Bhagavad-Gita. For in this world being is twofold, the divided one, the undivided one. All things that live are divided, that which sits apart, the undivided. Chapter 15, the Bhagavad Gita. Gautama, known as the Buddha, was the second known case of cosmic consciousness. He lived about 500 years before Jesus came, and his life affected the Orient as deeply as the life of Jesus affected the Occident. He was the son of a very rich landowner, and lived in great luxury at the time the supernatural light descended upon him. He left all this, and his wife and son, to live alone in the wilderness for a long time. He then began to teach men to seek eternal peace within themselves through much meditation, aloneness, and complete renunciation of worldly matters. Like all who are illumined, the Buddha gained all his real knowledge from within himself. He decried that all kind of so-called knowledge of the schools as superficial, if not useless. This point is well illustrated in his story of a youth who returned from school with much ego after 12 years of classical studies. The boy's father said to him, Sivataketu, as you are so conceited, considering yourself so well read and so stern, my dear, have you ever asked for the instruction by which we hear that we cannot be heard? Have you ever asked for that instruction by which we hear that which cannot be heard? By which we perceive that which we cannot be perceived? That which cannot be perceived? By which we know that which cannot be known? This quotation is proof that the Buddha passed through the genius stage without having known it. Or if he did know it, no historian has ever understood the fact sufficiently to record it. Perhaps the essence of his experience is in the following words. That one, the self, through never stirring, is swifter than thought. The senses never reached it. It walked before them. Through standing still, it overtakes the others who are running. The moving spirit bestows powers upon it. It stirs and it stirs not. It is far and likewise near. It is inside of all this and it is outside of all this. And he who beholds all things in the self and the self in all beings, he never turns away from it. When to a man who understands the self has become all things, what sorrow, what trouble can there be to him who once beheld that unity? When the teachings of all the mystics are thoroughly comprehended, there could be but one religion, for the teachings are one. There can be no fault in any religion which seeks to know God. The fault lies only in the inability of man to seek God, know God, and be God. The human race must unfold in orderly stages. Comprehension will come to all men, but man himself can hasten it by deeply desiring it, and by deeply seeking within himself for it through much meditation and wordless prayer. Plotinus and Muhammad were born into the world during the 12th centuries of Dark Ages. It is more than probable that Dante was also an illuminate. It is claimed that he was, but I am not sufficiently convinced of that fact to include him. Plotinus was born in 204 AD and lived 70 years. He discarded all that is called scholarship, meaning that so-called knowledge which the senses record upon human brains as memory, impressions. It is important that the present generations of men should understand his exalted point of view, for the modern system of creating scholars is the superficial one of accumulating information concerning effects of motion, upon the assumption that such information is knowledge. In that sense, we have no scholars which have been school-made. If we have scholars, they are self-made. Plotinus uses the word appearances, in the sense which we use the word information. I quote him. External objects present us only with appearances. Concerning them, therefore, we may be said to possess opinion rather than knowledge. Our question lies with the ideal reality that exists behind appearance. How does the mind perceive these ideals? Are they without us? And is the reason, like sensation, occupied with objects external to itself? What certainty would we then have? What assurance that our perception was infallible? The object perceived would be a something different from the mind perceiving it. We should have then an image instead of reality. It would be monstrous to believe for a moment that the mind was unable to perceive ideal truth exactly as it is, and that we had not certainty and real knowledge concerning the world of intelligence. It follows, therefore, that this religion of truth is not to be investigated as a thing external to us, and so imperfectly known, it is within us. Here the objects we contemplate and that which contemplates are identical, both are thought. The subject cannot surely know an object different from itself. It is the agreement of the mind with itself. Consciousness, therefore, is the sole basis of certainty. The mind is its own witness. Reason sees in itself that which is above itself as its source, and again that which is below itself is still itself once more. As above, so below. How very different is this language to that which is familiar to our schools and scholars who applaud the brilliance of the student who can remember and repeat more events and incidents than any other student. Observe also that Plotinus told man to seek truth within him as Jesus did. Considering the knowledge of Plotinus herein expressed, he is asked, how can we know the infinite? I answer, not by reason. It is the office of reason to distinguish and define. The infinite, therefore, cannot be ranked among its objects. You can only apprehend the infinite by a faculty superior to reason, by entering into a state in which you are your finite self no longer, in which the divine essence is communicated to you. This is ecstasy, cosmic consciousness. It is the liberation of your mind from its finite consciousness. Mohammed is one of the great illumined. 3 great religions grew out of the world's 3 great mystics. The religions are all different, but the words and teachings are the same. Moslemism is the practice totally different from either Christianity or Buddhism, but that is the fault of its practice, not of its principle. This could also be said about Christianity and Buddhism. Those who could compare the teachings of Muhammad, Jesus, and the Buddha would find that not one whit of difference in essence. Also, if the words of all these 3 are compared with those of Francis Bacon, Shakespeare, Walt Whitman, Jacob Bremen, Balzac, or John Yeats, they would all be the same in essence, even though the words differ. Muhammad used the word paradise in the same sense that Jesus used the word kingdom of God. Used the words kingdom of God. And the Buddha used the word nirvana. Muhammad said, "This is the day of eternity, into it in peace," which parallels the words of Jesus, "The kingdom of God is within you." John Yeats said, "God is always in man, and very commonly the soul is aware of his presence. It is as if he slept in the soul. If he wakes up only once in a man's whole life, the experience of that moment affects the whole life." Another modern mystic who has transformed millions of lives and turned their eyes to the light is the Baha'u'llah, the founder of a great religious movement known as the Baha'i faith. Although he was not listed in Dr. Buch's classic work as an illuminant, the unfolding of physical man to spiritual man always comes through the revelations of cosmic messengers who have been illumined with the higher knowledge by becoming holy mind for even a brief period, but always enough to transform the whole through their own transformation. A study of the ascent of man will reveal that each upward step has been caused by the advent of a cosmic messenger who periodically appears among men with new knowledge which has been revealed to him for that purpose. It will also reveal the fact that when any man of higher knowledge and ideals than the average of his day comes into the world, he is persecuted, ridiculed, imprisoned, tortured, and even crucified by uncomprehending multitudes. The greater the message and the messenger, the greater the torture. These messengers who transform the world with new knowledge always meet with great personal suffering for their priceless gifts. The inventor, the pioneers, in the new ways and methods, the genius in the fine arts, or any man who dares to depart from traditional thinking, always meet with ridicule in various measures and forms until the value of his gift to the world is recognized. Jesus died on the cross. Leonardo died in poverty. Galileo was tortured. Copernicus was spurned and ridiculed. Bacon was forced to hide his identity in Shakespeare. Spinoza constantly feared arrest. Whitman was despised in his books banned. Mozart, Liszt, Chopin, and Schumann were hirelings, entertainers for the rich. Even Goodyear in our day suffered untold agonies for his gift of vulcanized rubber, which revolutionized transportation. The many always oppress the few. It is difficult for love and for knowledge to come into the world. Crucifixion always awaits love. Knowledge is always launched upon the sea of ignorance. That is why the journey of man is so long, so hard, and so slow. In Baha'u'llah is an exemplification of this trait of human nature, for he was tortured and imprisoned in chains for years, in a filthy black dungeon with thieves and murderers, until he was near death. Many of his followers were imprisoned with him and executed, yet the cosmic ecstasy of an eternally happy man remained with him through his far greater sufferings than even a crucifixion. Baha'u'llah's writings and teachings are the same in essence as those of all other Illuminati. They vary only in their wording, but not in their meaning. Where Jesus uses the word within, Baha'u'llah uses the word insight. Both have the same meaning, however. In describing the revelations of the mystics, he said, "Without words we speak, we communicate, we converse with God and hear the answer." It is universal in all mystics it is universal in all mystics to as frankly say they talk with God as it is for one man to say he talked with another. No greater evidence of Baha'u'llah's great understanding of the God presence in man could be found than the following extract from his teachings. It is said that Moses in the wilderness heard the voice of God, but that wilderness, that holy land, was his own heart. All of us, when we attain to a true spiritual condition, can hear the voice of God speaking to us in that wilderness. Baha'u'llah thoroughly comprehended the preeminently ecstatic state of God's mind to such an extent that nothing could affect his own eternal state of happiness and the contemplation of beauty and harmony which exists in all of God's creation. Even while suffering great agony, a body in prison, he refused to deviate from the principle which he taught, to the effect that nothing ill could happen to a man if he is happy. Take note of the fact that he said that while undergoing great physical suffering, he said afflictions and troubles are due to the state of not being content with what God has ordained for you. If one submits himself to God, he is happy. By this he means that wherever whatever may be your destiny while working with God, that you must submit to, for that is your glory. When asked where happiness comes from, he answered, "Because all existing things move according to my wish. Therefore, I do not do anything contrary to my desire. Thus I have no sorrow. There is no doubt that all beings move by the will of God, and I have given up my own will, desiring the will of God. Thus my will becomes the will of God, for there is nothing of myself. All are moving by his will, yet they are moving by my will. In this case, I am very happy." The purity, the friendliness, and happiness of his teachings cannot but ennoble anyone who tries to fathom their depths. In Baha'is faith, which he founded, is without doctrine and completely tolerant of all religions and faiths, and expresses the desire for that day of unity when there will be but one religion. In all his teachings, tolerance for things which men do and say is conspicuous. His attitude is that man does not know where he is going when he does evil things, for he is but on his way to knowing. That is the same attitude expressed by Jesus when he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He condemned nobody while expressing his regret that others teach, or practice anything which was contrary to God's law, as he so plainly did in admonishing St. Paul for his disapproval of marriage and for his prophesying that sects would arise which would be celibate. Baha'u'llah laid this fault down to superstition and ignorance of God's law. That grabbler, Paul. His tolerance extended to even his prophecies about the coming of other messengers who would come with new knowledge suited to their day and age, and specifically foretold of a scientific revelation. Baha'is' faith is worldwide, and its followers give evidence of the inspiring nature of its teachings by their exemplary lives and actions. All who have reached cosmic conscious stage have attained full God awareness. They not only know God, but they unhesitatingly state their oneness with Him. Jesus not only said, "I and my Father are one," but said that every man is one with Him and with God when he knows that He is. All cosmic messengers have said that same thing, in essence, if not in the same words. The only difference between any man and Jesus or the Buddha or Shakespeare or Potterwhisky is divine awareness, nothing else. Every cosmic conscious messenger very plainly tells you that, but few believe it because few comprehend it. Long ages of outward thinking have unfitted them for comprehending it. A very few years of inward meditative thinking will give one greater God awareness than centuries of outward thinking. For another example of similarity of cosmic thinkers, compare the words of Jacob Remen. Spiritual knowledge cannot be communicated from one intellect to another, but must be sought for in the Spirit of God. With Walt Whitman, who says, "Wisdom is of the soul. It cannot be passed from one having it to another not having it." Bremen also wrote, "The gate was opened to me, that in 1/4 of an hour I saw and knew more than if I had been many years together at a university." All of them are in full agreement that those who are illumined into cosmic consciousness are given a profound wisdom or knowledge of the very essence of God, which can never be acquired from books or school or any outside source whatsoever. Likewise, all cosmic mystics have said in essence, God is love, and I am love, and that all men are one brotherhood, and also I am all men. Walt Whitman, Francis Bacon, Shakespeare, and Mary Baker Eddy are the three greatest mystics of the late centuries. Their works are fairly saturated with the idea of love, unity, brotherhood of man, and spiritual identity. Whitman says, "And I know that the land of God is the elder hand of my own, and I know that the Spirit of God is the eldest brother of my own, and that all men ever born are also my brothers, and the women my sisters and lovers, and that kelson of creation." What the hell does kelson mean? Kelson, or kelison, is the foundation upon which a ship is built. Oh, that's what it means. Where was I? Damn. Let's just start this over. Whitman says, "And I know that the hand of God is the elder hand of my own, and I know that the Spirit of God is the eldest brother of my own, and that all men ever born are also my brothers, and the women my sisters and lovers, and that a kelson of creation is love. In describing the supernatural flash of light which always accompanies full illumination, Whitman says, "As in a swoon, one instant, another sun ineffable full dazzles me. And all the orbs I knew, the brighter unknown orbs, one instant of the future land, heaven's land." How much these words are like those in the Bhagavad-Gita, written thousands of years ago. No words could more forcibly express the emptiness of the world of material values, which seems to be the first aim of those who have made this world what it is, than these of Whitman. "Hast never come to thee an hour, a sudden gleam divine, precipitating bursting? All these bubbles fashion wealth? These eager business aims, books, politics, arts, armors, to utter nothingness. Mary Baker Eddy was the only woman who has been known to have reached that spiritual stage of cosmic consciousness. Walt Whitman said she was the most recent. Her name was not included in Dr. Buch's list of immortals who have arrived at the stage of cosmic consciousness, but it should have been. Miss Eddy experienced her first cosmic illumination when she was 12 years old. She did not know what it meant at the time. No one who has that experience ever does at the time it happens, for it is so rare that few know about it. Also, it is entirely unanticipated. She describes it as follows: "And a soft glow of ineffable joy came over me. She was in a fever at the time, and the fever suddenly disappeared. That is also characteristic of the transformation which takes place during an illumination." She also said that other incidents of extraordinary nature occurred at the time. This same experience of cosmic illumination again occurred when she was 45. She was seriously ill at the time, but again she was restored to normalcy during that short period of ecstasy which always accompanies the illumination. As in all other cases of cosmic consciousness, she was given the knowledge that all mind is one, which she calls divine mind, that the body is not the person, that there is no life, truth, or intelligence in matter, and that there is no evil nor death in nature. Such revelations coming under such conditions are full and complete evidence of her cosmic illumination. Further evidence of it lies in the words and manner of her teachings which she imparted to others. She very clearly denied that sin existed in nature and explained it as a belief in man's mortal mind, meaning the senses. She also taught what all cosmic illuminates know, that Jesus came to save mankind from a belief in sin, and not that he came to save man from sin. She called world attention to the fact that Jesus never used the word sin with the connotation of evil which men give to it. Jesus used the word in a sense of experience, as he used it in the case of the man with the palsy, to whom he said, "Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee." Miss Eddy, who firmly states that God the Creator created only that which was good, and that truth and goodness are one. Therefore nothing real could be existent which is not good, and manifests truth in him. Nothing is more convincing evidence of her right to be included in the very immortals who have been illumined with the light of God's mind than the following extracts from her teachings. "Man is not a material habitation of the soul. He is himself spiritual. Man is idea, the image of love. He is not a physique. Man is the reflection of God, or mind, therefore is eternal, that which has no separate mind from God, that which has not a single quality underived from deity, that which possesses no life, intelligence, nor creative power of his own, but reflects spiritually all that belongs to his Maker. Man is incapable of sin, sickness, and death. Such cosmic knowledge does not come from earthly teachings. They are not in any of man's books, nor were they taught to her by the church which she attended. Cosmic knowledge comes to earth only through divine messengers who have known the oneness with the one mind of the universe. Such knowledge comes only to one in billions of humans. Mary Baker Eddy may never have heard of cosmic consciousness, so rare it is, but she frankly declared that I won my way to absolute conclusions through divine revelations, reason, and demonstration. That is what cosmic consciousness is. My husband's entire scientific knowledge came that way. In May of 1921, he had no knowledge whatsoever of astronomy, chemistry, mathematics, electricity, nor the construction of matter. He did not care to know them, for his desires were in the fine arts. In one timeless flash he became master of all the sciences, and knew as much in that one flash as he knows now. In 1926 he gave his first gift to the scientific world in the Russell charts of the elements which completed the incomplete and incorrect Mendeleev charts. In this first of many contributions, he charted and announced the existence of urium and iridium and the 4 other transuranium elements which made atomic fission possible. He also deuterium and tritium and the other 4 hydrogen isotopes which made the H-bomb and heavy water possible. The world does not know urium and iridium by these names, however, for many years later, when science verified their existence, they renamed these 2 elements plutonium and neptunium. His contributions since then have been many, but the cosmogony which God gave him is so unlike the traditionally accepted one that it may be many years before its value may be recognized. All that I have ever known was revealed to me cosmically in the same manner. I also did not receive the formal education of the schools. That is why our combined knowledge, forcibly presented, may enlighten enough of those who are ready for it, to save the world in this 11th hour of its danger. Neither my husband's knowledge nor mine ever came from books or schools, however. It was cosmically inspired. Knowledge has never come into the world in any other way. Circumstances forced me into a great aloneness in my youth, and these were my rich years, my formative years, which finally culminated in my own illumining in 2 great periods. These 2 periods so utterly transformed me that a greater power of self-expression came to me than I had ever known. I found whatever I desired to do, I could do. And that is what you would find if you sought within yourself for knowledge and power as we have. It is important to tell you some of the facts regarding the way we received all our knowledge in order that you may acquire cosmic knowledge if you so desire. All illuminates will tell you the same thing. Down through the ages they have said that all knowledge could be obtained only from within, that the kingdom of heaven was within, that all else would be added unto who seeks it from within. The whole purpose of this book is to point the way to all knowledge and power for you. To attain it, you have to acquire the power to think inwardly instead of sense outwardly. Begin early in life to do that. Do not wait until tradition or materialism insulates your soul by building a wall around it. That is why I feel impelled to break away from the treadmill of tradition in my childhood. I was as certain of my destiny and purpose at 3 years of age as I am now. My education came from looking into the hearts of the people of all the world and of nature. It was my good fortune to be able to travel extensively in Asia and Africa, as well as the English-speaking continents. I made a great discovery in doing so, which will be helpful to you if you apply it. I found that greater knowledge comes from the silences of what people do not say than from what they do say. I found greater knowing comes from the silences of what people do not say than from what they do say. It is that way in nature. The silences reach the soul with their deep meanings, while sounds must be translated from sensed awareness to mind intelligence. The silent words from the hearts of all men told me that all mankind is essentially good. All are seeking happiness and love. There is no evil in the search for love. So there can be no evil in a balanced universe which is all good. Our present-day world is not conducive to the search for love. Its human relations are based upon outer sensing. When they are based upon inner thinking, our human relations basis must change, for mankind will then have learned that what he does to others, he is doing to himself. A new language with its own meaning has come into the world from its illumined ones. The genius can hear nature's rhythms within his inner ears and see its spectrum harmonies with inner eyes, but the cosmic being can clearly comprehend the construction of matter and the workings of electric polarization as it divides and multiplies gravity into the contracted matter of sums and divides it to create a space. In less time than it takes to write this description, one who knows nothing of the universe knows all of it. In that brief flash he becomes master and chemist and knows the stars of heaven beyond all men. This explanation of this fact is simple. When man's mind of God becomes one, their thinking is one. They do not become synchronized as two, but are one. That which heretofore seemed to pulse within them separately pulses universally. The illuminate suddenly becomes in tune with the infinite. He instantly becomes the thinker and the knower instead of being an extension of the thinker and knower. God's mind thinks in octave thought waves. Every creative thought is electrically divided into octave thought waves, which require 4 efforts to create matter into living bodies and 4 more efforts to void those bodies. Every action and reaction in nature repeats this simple life-death principle. There is no exemption to it throughout the universe. Every incoming, outgoing breath repeats it. Every sound repeats it, and the pulsing of the stars repeats it. Within the simple principle lies all knowledge, for in it is all cause which can be known, and all effect which can be comprehended is simplicity. Its simplicity is instantly recognized by the highly spiritual inward thinker, who is enabled to strip it of its complexity by making it stand still and be only one, instead of many billions in 1 second. To the cosmic thinker who can make the universe stand still and void time, creation unfolds from the soul of idea to create form. All forms are thought forms which appear, disappear, and reappear forever. When one sees forms unfold from seed and refold into seed, one sees all there is to see and to know. There is nothing else to know, for mind is the seed of creation from which all forms unfold from zero of invisibility to become visible for a time before refolding into invisible mind. That is all there is to all philosophy, all sciences, and all mathematics. Certain great Illuminati, whom no one has ever known, left messages in great stone pyramids for future man to decipher, and to tell them of their existence long ages ago. These illumined ones knew astronomy and mathematics beyond perhaps even our day. They could not have acquired this knowledge from books, for there were no books or universities. The measurements of these pyramids prove that they not only could measure the diameter of the earth with great precision, but 100 other astronomical and mathematical measurements provide vast knowledge in other directions. They gave strong evidence of possessing an extrasensory possession, such as our civilization has not yet attained. In one of these pyramids, events 3,000 years ahead are accurately foretold. Knowing cause and knowing these... Where am I? I just gotta start over. In one of these pyramids, events 3,000 years ahead of are accurately foretold. Knowing cause, these ancient mystics could deduce the effects which must follow. These few must have founded some brotherhood through which they kept their knowledge alive, for the same principles and measurements are repeated in part in Tibet and the civilizations which lie buried one upon another in the Andes and Central America. Conclusion. These men of great knowledge acquired their knowledge from somewhere other than universities and books, for there were neither universities nor books in their day. According to modern educational standards, all their vast knowledge would be denied them and considered of no avail because it was not acquired through legitimate channels, which means through the senses. Today's intellectual world denies that knowledge can be spiritually acquired through revelation and inspiration, which means by talking to God. The lesson mankind should learn through the lives of the greatest men who have ever lived on this planet is that knowledge can only be acquired through the inner spirit of man, and not through his body, or through matter, or through motion. Knowledge comes from within, not from without. The men who have been the world's most priceless treasures probably never attended school, or if they did, they were not counted as the most brilliant students. Whether or not such men as Bacon, Buddha, Beethoven, Leonardo, Jesus, Tennyson, or Schumann ever attended school, it is most certain that the great knowledge of these divine messengers came to the world was not a part of any school curriculum. Their knowledge came from the spiritual foundations of themselves. They had found the kingdom of heaven, and all that heaven had to give was added unto them. The great lesson for each man to learn from the lives and works of these immortals is that each man's own immortality can be found only by inner thinking and deep meditation and deep wordless spiritual prayer from the heart and not from the lips. The only way the silent voice can become audible to man is through inner ears. The only way man can vision God is through inner eyes. That is the only way man can knowingly work with God, and God with man to produce enduring things. It is the only way that God, the Creator, can be manifested in man, the Creator. Likewise, the only way there can be a spiritual birth in the world is through spiritual thinking, which establishes values based upon man rather than matter. The greatest motive for world crimes lies in greed to obtain money. For this he sells his soul by crucifying love and human values. When man learns that man is man's greatest asset, he will serve his fellow man instead of killing him as he does now for material values. Crime will disappear when the motive for crime disappears, and peace will come when love appears. And we will pick this up possibly tomorrow, possibly the next day. I don't know. I've been reading a lot.